I'll begin just with a few housekeeping items which you'll see listed in the notes window. To the left of the screen is a Q&A and chat window. In order to make the best use of our time today, James will address any questions posted in the Q&A window as and when they're posted, just rather than leave them all to the end of the session. So please do feel free to chip in at any stage during the session. If you have any general comments or feedback, you can use the chat window. Okay, let's get started. Today we're going to be looking at various student response systems that allow you to create an interactive discussion with your class. We've selected Kahoot, Socrative, and Poll Everywhere, which are freely available online for anyone to use. But before we actually focus on the tools, let's talk briefly about student response systems in general and why you might want to use any one of these 3 free tools in the classroom. A student response or clicker system is one of the many ways that technology can be used to gather feedback from students in a classroom. One of the problems, though, with clicker systems to date is the cost of acquiring the clicker remote handsets. However, today we are focusing on 3 alternatives to purchasing a clicker system, which will allow your students to turn their smartphones, tablets, and web browsers into reliable response tools that work just as well as conventional clickers. So why would you want to go with this approach? Well, apart from the fact that it's a fun and refreshing way to learn and participate in a group setting, the learning benefits of questions cannot be achieved if students don't participate in the formulation of answers to the questions. Student response systems can be helpful in introducing active learning strategies into your teaching, bringing more energy and interactivity into the classroom or lecture hall. Other advantages include they encourage greater engagement and participation from students in your class. They can allow students to answer questions anonymously without risking embarrassment for incorrect or naive answers. And they allow teachers to identify times when it's necessary to reteach concepts and material. So the first free tool we're going to have a look at today is Kahoot. So I should just mention, depending on your connection speed, if you do experience any buffering at all or a slight pause at any stage during the demo, just bear with us as it will resume after a few seconds. So this demo is roughly about 10 minutes.
So here we are at getkahoot.com, where we're going to launch Kahoot from. You might notice here that I'm actually using Google Chrome as my browser for Kahoot. I found that some of the elements of Kahoot didn't render correctly in Internet Explorer, so if you find the same, try Chrome or Firefox or something like that. There only are 2 options on the first screen in Kahoot. It's either get my free account or sign in if you already got an account. So if, like me, you already have an account, I'm going to click sign in. Kahoot will have remembered my credentials, and it logs me into my Kahoot dashboard. I have a few options from here. You'll notice I've got some statistics about Kahoots that I've ran in the past over on the left hand side. Along the top, for instance, I can see any Kahoots that I've made before. So I've made 1 Kahoot in the past. I can click into this icon here to see that and even maybe reuse it with another class. Or I can browse the 62,000 plus Kahoots that are available publicly. So there might be something already applicable that I could use in my class that I can find there. I'm not going to use any of those though. We're going to look at actually creating a Kahoot today, and to do that, we come down here to this little box that says create new Kahoot. We're going to look at the quiz today, so I'm going to click on quiz to start creating our quiz. It asks us to give it a name. I'm going to call this one Landmarks Quiz and click go. So you'll notice now that we have our Landmarks Quiz name in there. If we want to change that at any stage, we can just click the edit key to alter our title. Our first question, here it has been generated, question 1, and a little box beside it to put our question text in. So what's the first question we want to pose to your students? So I'm going to key my question text in here. So I've added my question: in which city would you find the landmarks shown below? I specifically used that language because we're going to put a little image now in as well, just so that you can see how to do that. To add any visual elements, you need to select the image tab or the video tab. The video tab allows you to add a YouTube video, but it is very much experimental at the minute. We're going to add an image, so we're going to stay on the image tab, and then we're going to choose our file just by clicking here, choose file, and browse to where we want to find our image. So as usual, we could flick through our different locations here in our browser. I happen to be open to the right location, so I'm going to pick my Statue of Liberty and upload that. And then down below that, we're going to add the possible answers that our students can choose from. So there are 4 currently displayed. We don't have to use all 4. We can click this minus key if we want to get rid of some of them. So we could click it once. That leaves us with only 3 possible answers, and we can then add in the names of, or the text belonging to those answers. So once we've added the text for each of the possible answers, we need to specify to Kahoot which one is correct, simply by toggling the incorrect correct tab. If I click on this incorrect, it becomes correct. And if you have more than one correct answer for your multiple choice question, you can click more than one tab. If you do something by accident, if you make an answer correct by accident, simply click it again to untoggle it. We then need to choose whether our question is going to be a points question or not a points question, and what the time limit is going to be. You might decide to not award points for these, just in case you worry that students are going to feel left behind if they get some questions wrong or don't have as many points as others. But Kahoot is very much kind of a game-based mechanic, so most of the questions will work better if you add points to them. That's sort of the way Kahoot is designed to work. So if we leave this as a points question, points are related to time. So each question is worth 1,000 points in Kahoot, but you lose points as time ticks away. So the more time limit we put on, more time we put in here, the slower the points tick away. If we only set that to 10 seconds, we're going to lose 100 points every single second that we don't get it right. We leave it at the default 30 there in the meantime. If we want to add more questions, we simply click add another question and follow the same process again. But when we're happy with what we've done, we can click next and go into our settings menu. So here in the settings menu, one thing to note is that Kahoot are very keen on you to have your Kahoot set not to private but to public. Private being that only you and your students, for instance, can see it. Public being that everyone in the world can search through it, and they want to create a very much a community driven project. So lots of these options here are designed so that people can easily find your Kahoot amongst all of the 62,000 other Kahoots that are available in the world. So we'll ask you to set up things like your language. It'll ask you to set up your primary audience, to add a description of your Kahoot, to specify the difficulty level, and even to add tags if you want keywords to actually give more of an indication of what your Kahoot's about. Once you're finished with that, click next to go to the cover image of your Kahoot, and you can choose any image in the same way just by browsing for it and specifying what the cover image for your Kahoot's going to be. Once you're finished with all that, you can simply click done. So we're going to click play now to play our Kahoot with our class straight away. When we launch the Kahoot, the first screen our student sees is a screen telling them to get their mobile devices out, followed by another screen which tells them how to join the Kahoot itself. So it gives them the address to punch into their mobile device, as well as the game pin, which is the pin that will let them join specifically or Kahoot. So let's see how a student on a mobile device would join the Kahoot now. So here we have a student's mobile device. In this case it's a smartphone. To get into the Kahoot, they'll open up their browser and key in the website address that's being displayed to them at the front of the room. That's kahoot.it. Once they've entered this address, they'll simply click go to navigate to the website. Kahoot then asks them for the game pin, which again should be on the screen in the front of the room. So they'll key in the game pin that's being shown to them and click enter. The last thing that Kahoot asks them for is a nickname, some way to track their own progress through the Kahoot game. And once they key that in, they can click join game. Kahoot tells them they're now in the Kahoot game and that their name should be displayed at the front of the room. So let's see what the teacher's console looks like now that students are joining. So looking back at our teacher's console, which is also being displayed on the data projector at the front of the room, we can see that students are now beginning to populate our Kahoot quiz. If we're standing at the front of our classroom, we know how many students we expect to be in the class, and we probably also know their names. In this case, we're waiting for 5 players to join. And as soon as the 5th player joins, we can think about beginning our Kahoot quiz. To that, we need to click on the Start Now button, which is here on the right hand side of the screen. Once we click the Start Now button, it tells the students just to get ready for a few seconds. as the quiz itself loads, and then shows them the first question. So they already have an idea of what's coming before the question itself appears. So here we have the timer on the left hand side, the image in the middle, and the responses below. The responses are important because the students won't see the text New York, Paris or Berlin in their consoles. They only see red triangle, blue hexagon and yellow circle. Let's take a look at the student's console now. So here on the student's mobile device, when the quiz is loading, we're given a get ready screen. That then transitions to a 5-second countdown for our first question. So we know the first question is incoming. When the question itself loads, on the data projector at the front of the room, we're told what each of these symbols corresponds to. So we know that red triangle corresponds to New York, and we think that that's the answer. The student will punch that on their own phone and be told just to wait. Let's go back to the teacher screen now. So back at our teacher screen, which is shown at the front of the room, the answers here on the right hand side start to count up as students submit their responses. As soon as the 5th response is submitted, the question ends irrespective of the time left. And we're showing what the correct answer was and how many people voted for it. The students also get a little bit of visual feedback on their own devices. So let's look at that now. So here on the student's device, when the question ends, the student's told they answered the question correctly or incorrectly, in this case correctly. We're also told how many points we received for it, and that's based on the amount of time it took us to answer. We're told what position we're in, and even what position we're in relative to others. So you can see why Kahoot introduces a bit of fun and competition into the classroom, and how students would start to try and compete with one another to gain positions or gain more points than others. Let's go back to the teacher screen now just to see how we end the Kahoot. So back at our teacher screen, it's just a matter of clicking the next button to move on to the next part. We're given a little scoreboard to show us how each students are getting on. If we had more questions, we would move on to them, but in this case we don't. So we just click end. Our students are given a final and the winner is screen. Obviously if there were more questions, there'd be more points and there would be a little bit of competition. We can move on next to the feedback and results portion. So here we're showing a little table where our students can rate the Kahoot to show us how they got on with it. The students are given a little console to do this, so let's take a look at that now. So back here at our student's mobile device, we can see that a new page is loaded asking them to rate their experience of the Kahoot. They're asked 4 simple questions. How fun was it? Did you learn something? Would you recommend it? And how do you feel? They respond to these questions by simply clicking on the little emoticon shown, whether it's the number of stars it was worth, a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and finally the little smiley faces. Once they're finished, they get a little thank you note and a final screen showing them the results of the Kahoot, how they finished, what their responses were, etc. There's also little links to share these on social networks if they feel keen to do that. Let's go back to the teacher screen to see how these survey results are tallied. So here on our final teacher screen, our results are rolling in for our survey. The number in the top left hand corner tells us how many students have submitted their responses. We're now up to 5 and we're given an average of all their responses. When we're happy with the data that we've collected, we can click final results here in the top right hand corner to show a final scoreboard of how our students got on with the Kahoot. As you can see, we can download these results if we want to keep them for a game. We can play the Kahoot again, or we can play a completely different one. That's Kahoot in a nutshell, so let's move on to our next tool.
Okay, I think you can see from James's demo there just how easy it is for a teacher to set up a quiz, and also how students interact from their devices. One of Kahoot's game-based design is which makes it especially appealing to students, I think, when you compare it to similar tools. So moving on to the next free tool we're going to look at today. In this 9-minute demo, we're going to take a look at how Socrative might work for you in the classroom.
So this is the Socrative website, www.socrative.com, and we're here just for a little demonstration of how Socrative works. So first of all, signing up and logging in. You'll note here at the top of the screen there's 3 buttons. If you've never used Socrative before, you'll need to use the teacher sign up button to set up your account. Once you've done that, every time you visit the site thereafter, you'll use the teacher login button to supply your credentials to get logged into Socrative. Students log in slightly differently using this student login button, and we'll look at that in due course. I've already created my account with Socrative, so I'm going to use the teacher login button, where it asks me to supply my credentials. and I'll just click login to enter my account. And there we arrive then at the Socrative dashboard. So the first thing I want to look at is a little explanation of our first box here at the top, the My Room number. By signing up for Socrative, what we've actually asked Socrative to do is provide us with a space on Socrative that we'll keep coming back to. That's our Socrative room. So not only will we use this room in the future to build up our quizzes, but also it's going to be the room where our students are going to keep coming back to every time, always to the same room. To give you a better idea of that and how that actually works, we'll take a little look at the student login process. So let's look at a student's device. So if we look at a student's device, for example, their smartphone, what the student will do is open up their browser in their smartphone and navigate to Socrative.com, just as we did a minute or two ago. But if we look at the top of the page in Socrative, you'll see that they have a student login button. When the student clicks on the student login button, you'll note that Socrative doesn't ask them for a username or password or to generate any emails. All it asks the student to provide is the number of the room that they want to join. That's your room number that we saw a minute or two ago. Back in the teacher console, one thing we might want to do is to use the My Profile options to change this room number to something a little more memorable for our students. So I could, for instance, change it to RSCni, just to make it a little easier for students to join my room. So now whenever a student joins my room, we can see that we have one student has now entered our room. And if we're standing with the class in front of us, we're going to know how many students we're expecting to enter the room. So as our students log on, this number will increase as they populate the room, until eventually we have all our students in the room waiting to begin their first activity. So what kind of activities can we begin with? Well, if we look at this first block of options we have, they're called single question activities. The reason they're called that is because they will pose one single question to our students. These are designed to be quick and easy to use. There's very little customization needed on the part of you, the teacher. Really all that will happen is if we choose, say for instance, a multiple choice question, what will happen is the students will receive a console asking them to choose A, B, C, D or E. That's it. They'll not receive a question, they'll not be told what the options correspond to, they'll just be asked to pick A, B, C, D or E. So that kind of question is designed so that you at the front of the class can ask your students the question and then get them to vote on that really quickly. If we click on one now to see what it actually looks like, all that happens is we have a screen now awaiting responses from our students. We're told that we have 5 students in a room, so we're going to be waiting for 5 votes unless we choose to end our activity early. If we cut now to our students view, we'll be able to see what the console looks like from their perspective. So here we are at our students view, looking at our students' mobile device, and as we can see they're currently waiting for the activity to begin. As soon as the teacher selects an activity and it begins, we'll see that the student's console changes. So with our multiple choice activity that we started with the teacher, the student's then asked to provide a response to whatever question the teacher might have posed. Let's say for instance that the student thought the correct answer or their preferred answer was A. They would simply tap A on their console and we receive a message saying the activity's been completed and that we're waiting for the next activity to begin. If we look again now at our teacher's console, we'll see how as the votes roll in from the students, the votes themselves are tallied. So back on our teacher's console we can still see that we've our 5 students waiting here, and we're now just waiting for the votes to roll in. So as our students start to respond, you'll see that our display here as the teacher changes, and we begin to see how our students are reacting to the question that we pose to them. And as we can see here now, our votes are 5 out of 5, so we know all of our students have replied. The responses to this kind of multiple choice activity gives you, the teacher, some idea of how your class is getting on with an activity or reacting to an activity or question, and gives you an idea about how you can adapt the rest of the lesson. So once we're happy with the results that we've gathered, we can simply click on End Activity to return to our Socrative dashboard. In the single question activities, true or false is much the same as multiple choice, except obviously the students are simply asked to reply true or false, but short answers are slightly different, so we'll take a quick look at those now. So if we click into short answer questions, then we can have a look at what they're like. Short answer questions usually require more of a subjective response from students. We can use this box here to pose the question if we want. We can leave it blank and just deliver it to your students verbally if we prefer. I'll key in the question here because it means that their students are going to see it on their little consoles on their own devices whenever they come to provide a response. We then need to determine whether or not our students can respond once or as many times as they would like by specifying either single or unlimited responses. Similarly, we can choose whether our students can submit anonymously or if they have to provide a name. I'm going to click require a name for this particular example, but bear in mind that the anonymous option may encourage students who might otherwise not participate, thinking that their answers are perhaps silly or invalid. That could encourage them to come forward and actually get involved in the activity that you're running. Once you've put all of your options in, just click Start Activity. And then what we'll do is we'll jump over to a student device, now a mobile device, just to see what the console looks like for the short answer activity. So looking here at our student's mobile phone, we can see that they're awaiting the next activity to begin. And as soon as our teacher launches the short answer activity, the interface that the student has on their mobile device is going to change to reflect that. The first thing is we have to enter our name because the activity was set up to require the submission of a name. I'm going to key my name in and click continue. And as soon as we've done that, we'll see we have a little bit of a space here to respond to the question above. Which city would you most like to visit? So I click into the box on my mobile phone and enter my response. And when I'm happy with what I've entered, I just click submit. And my response has been submitted to the teacher along with the responses hopefully of the rest of the class. And we'll go back to the teacher's view now to see how those responses are gathered together. So we can see here now on our teacher's view that all the responses from the class, 5 out of 5, have been submitted. The responses are submitted in order bottom to top, first person to respond to last person to respond. So with this we can immediately do something else with our class. We can immediately poll our class and get them to vote on the responses to choose their favourite ones. Or alternatively we can just end our activity by clicking end activity here now. So with Socrative there's many other things we can do that we don't have time to look at today. Our next block down is quiz-based activities, and that's a much deeper area in Socrative. Quiz-based activities allows you to build quizzes from the ground up, save and store them, and then run them along with your class. The quizzes that you build you can fully customize, so you can pose not only the questions but you can also specify the answers that will appear on your students' consoles. And with those quizzes you can run them as a competitive fun game called a space race, where your students compete to race their rocket into space the fastest by answering the most questions in the shortest time. Which just gives it that little fun element if you prefer. That's all really time for in Socrative at the minute, so we'll just leave that there and move on to our next example.
Okay, so I think one of the main advantages you'll see from Socrative there is the number of options available in terms of question types. Socrative is also better if you want to actually just do a quick poll with your students on the spot, because it requires less time to set up a poll like that. So just a quick check if anyone has any questions about Socrative before we move on to our very final short demo. I see Catherine is typing. Okay, well, I'll move on anyway to the next tool, which is Poll Everywhere. And we're going to have a very quick look at a shorter demo this time, which lasts about 7 minutes, focusing on Poll Everywhere, which is our third and final free tool that you can use.
We're here at polleverywhere.com, which is the home page for the Poll Everywhere tool. Now what Poll Everywhere does slightly differently to other student response systems is it's designed to use text messages. So your students will respond to your poll by sending in a text message to a certain number. And we have two options at the top of our screen. We have login if we already have an account and need to supply our credentials, or sign up if we don't have an account and we need to create a new one. I'm going to click login and I'm going to put in my details and then click login, sign in. That takes us through to our Poll Everywhere dashboard. Now what we see here is, first of all, any polls we've created in the past and run in the past. So here's one I have used before. If I come over here to the right hand side, I can see how many responses there have been to it. So there have been 6 responses to that poll, and I can click into that poll to see what those responses were. What we want to do today though is come up to the top left hand corner and click create a poll to make a new poll, just so we can see how it's done. Poll Everywhere has quite a handy little 3-minute tutorial video on creating polls, just in case you've never done it before or if you've forgotten how to do it. I'm going to come down here into this line though, the poll question, to actually supply the question that I'm asking my students to respond to. As soon as I type information into this, we'll get a few more options displayed down below, and we'll go through those in just a second. So I've asked the question, which city would you most like to visit? And then below that now we have a few extra options to specify. So the first thing is, what kind of a poll are we running? How is my audience going to respond? If we choose open-ended, which is the default response, or audience, in this case our students, will respond by typing out their own subjective answer. So they'll supply their own answer and text that through to a particular number. Those are then displayed in whatever way we want, depending on which we select. Text wall, which is just one after the other. Word cloud, which is our words just in a little bubble or cloud. Cluster, which is a bit like a text wall except tiled. And a ticker, which will scroll across our screen showing all the responses. So that's the open-ended response. Bear in mind that's a subjective one, so your students get to choose what they type into the answer to that one. If you want to be more restrictive, we can choose multiple choice, where we specify the answers that the audience can choose from. In other words, the audience can only text in one of the answers that we've responded. Anything else doesn't get registered. We'll come back to this one in a second, because we're going to use that as our example. The last one is clickable image, and it departs slightly from the Poll Everywhere model because it isn't used through a text message service. The clickable image requires students to load the poll in a browser, so it would have to be through a laptop or a mobile device that can open up a web browser. And the way it works is, it says your audience can respond by clicking anywhere in an image. If I choose an image here, so click on upload an image and pick, for instance, this map of the world, and Poll Everywhere starts to upload my image, and after a few seconds our image then loads. What would happen then is, when we send this poll out to our students would load up the web page and click anywhere in this image to respond to the poll. The image would record where they've clicked, and that is effectively our way of polling the students. So they would simply click on, say, the continent where the city was that they'd most like to visit. We could see everywhere that our students had clicked. What we want to do, however, is create a multiple choice question, so that's the example poll we're going to run. So it's in response to the question, which city would you most like to visit, and I want to give them the answers. So true or false isn't much use, so I'm going to put in a couple of different options here. So supply 2, if I want to add another answer, I can just click the add an answer button, and even if I want to add a fourth, I'll click it again, and we've now got 4 possible options. We can include an image URL in here as well, so if there's an image we find on a website that we want to use instead of an actual name, we can use that, but I'm just going to type text in. When we're happy with all the potential responses that we're putting into our multiple choice, we just scroll down to the bottom and click create to launch our poll. And we now have our graph displayed on screen. So it asks the question, which city would you most like to visit? This will be displayed probably at the front of the room on a data projector, but I'll show you a slightly different way to display it in a minute or two. What we have is the little line asking our students to text a code to this number. So the code, if we mouse over it, corresponds to these numbers displayed in red. So in other words, if the student would like to answer with the answer New York, they would text in this code 223195 to this number, and we would register one response for New York. Let's just see that in action now. So once the student sends through their text message, Poll Everywhere counts that as a response for that particular answer. So the data comes through live. With multiple choice polls, one restriction is that students can only answer once. It's different than an open-ended one. They can text through as many answers as they want, but if they try to reply again, it'll tell them that they can only reply to this poll once. So I mentioned another way of displaying this live poll data, and that's, as you can see over on the right hand side here, to display it as a slide within a PowerPoint. If I click this, actually what this takes me to is just a link to download the Poll Everywhere plugin for PowerPoint. So you need to do that first. But if I open PowerPoint up, you can see exactly what that looks like. So here's a pre-made PowerPoint that I have, and you'll notice that along my ribbon at the top here, I have a Poll Everywhere tab. When I click on that, I can log in and log out with my Poll Everywhere credentials as normal. But what I can also do is I can click Insert Poll Slide. When I click that, it links to my account and picks up any polls that I have created. So here's the multiple choice poll that we've currently been working on. Which city would you most like to visit? If I click Insert Selected Poll, it'll drop that poll into my PowerPoint presentation as a slide. I can interact with that as normal by moving it about. The poll itself is just a placeholder at the minute, so we can make that a little bit smaller, like so. But whenever I actually launch my PowerPoint presentation to actually view it at the front of the classroom, if I skip forward to my first slide, you can see that our poll is displayed in the full screen on the slide. The next slide along is a poll that I created a little while ago. The data is still live, so this is an open-ended one where the students text through their responses to a number. It's open-ended. The time that they've supplied those responses is recorded below each one, and you can see I'm still in PowerPoint, I'm still in full screen, and we'll put another response through here now so you can see how the live data comes through. So as a new response comes through from a student, the PowerPoint slide changes, and we can see the new response highlighted on the time that it came through. So that's Poll Everywhere. It's slightly different. And it's a little bit fun and innovative, so I hope that's been useful. Thanks very much for watching.
Okay, thanks for that, James. With Poll Everywhere, I think the ability to integrate your poll into your actual PowerPoint slides is a really nice feature. But I should probably point out that compared with other tools, Poll Everywhere is mainly SMS based, so there is a cost incurred by your students when they reply by text. You can always use the free account, but there are limitations to the number of students you can poll, and you're tied to using long text codes as you saw in the demo. Okay, I'm quite conscious of the time now as we've moved over our 30 minutes, but I just have one more slide left which I think is really, really important to cover, and it's just about looking at some considerations for use in your classroom. It's really important from the very beginning to explain to your class the pedagogical benefits of class participation using this method. For example, student engagement, collaborative learning, instant feedback, etc. Research has shown that student attention begins to drift after 10 minutes of traditional learning. Therefore, 3 to 4 well-paced student response exercises per 60-minute class session would be reasonable. The key to success here really is in your questions. You don't want to set trivial questions, you want ones that challenge your students, that requires them to think. Questions that are too simple or just ask students to recall basic facts are less useful than questions which challenge students' ability to explain key ideas. You can conduct concept tests where you assess knowledge from your current lecture, a previous lecture, or a previous course in order to stimulate discussion. One good approach is to set a question, poll your students, ask them to pair up with someone who chose a different response to discuss the reasoning behind each of their answers, and then you poll again. And you'll notice that the responses will change the second time around, with more students hitting the correct response this time. This method of teaching, called peer instruction, really helps students to clarify their thinking and allows students with a stronger grasp of the material to explain the material at a level more easily understood by their peers. You should start and end a class with a key conceptual question. This type of pre- and post-testing tells you how well you got the information across and lets the students see what they have learned. Students really appreciate the instant feedback which this method provides. If you assign homework reading, use the first 5 minutes of class to ask a few questions to see if students have read and understand the assignment. This is a great chance to be sure all your students are starting the class with the same prior knowledge. Try to ask students' opinion about issues relevant to your course and use the responses to present new information and correct misinformation or misunderstandings. Now, I'm not suggesting you do all of the above within one lesson. These are merely general considerations just to keep in mind. Okay, so we do hope we've given you some food for thought today. Does anyone at all have any final questions they'd like to ask just before we finish up? I can see some questions coming in. Okay, mainly around Adobe Connect at the minute from what I can see. As we are running a little bit over, I'll keep talking and I'll just keep my eye on the questions coming in. If you are seriously considering using this type of technology in your classroom, but you still feel a little bit unsure maybe of where to start, we would be more than happy to have a chat with you in person. Our contact details, as you can see, are listed on the screen if you do want to get in touch, or if you would like details of future webinars, you can check out any of the RSCni webinars that are coming up. So I don't see any new questions coming in, so on that note, I'll say goodbye from us. Until the next time, thank you for joining.